On my 75th birthday, I overheard my daughter-in-law say, "I hope this is her last one." I didn't say anything, just smiled. The next day, I made a phone call that would shift everything. If you're watching, go ahead and subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. The party had been James's idea. My only son, always eager to honor mom properly. It was a classy gathering held in the house I designed 4 decades ago, though lately it had been changing bit by bit as Rebecca redecorated it to fit her own tastes. I left a conversation with some old colleagues to use the bathroom. My legs felt oddly heavy, a feeling that had slowly grown worse since my sister Elaine passed 3 years back. Walking down the hall, I heard voices from James's study. "I hope this is her last birthday," Rebecca was saying, the light catching her champagne glass. "I already know how I'll turn her studio into a dream closet." I stopped in my tracks, hand on the wall. Then James's voice, usually my shield, my pride, cut through me with cold precision. "The doctor says her heart won't last long. Once it happens, everything's officially ours." They clinked glasses. Quiet laughter. Decades of architecture had trained me to assess structure under pressure. I straightened, put on the calm mask I'd learned to wear in boardrooms, and rejoined the guests. Later, James toasted me to the best mother a son could ask for. That same son had always wrestled with being in my shadow, the one who bristled when people described him as just Caroline Weber's son. I nodded, my smile calm, but my eyes finally saw clearly. James had slowly taken over my life after Elaine died. He started with tech support, then finances, and eventually managed my heart medication. That night, lying alone in bed, I thought about how his ambition had always been fueled by the approval he never got from his father. My late husband had disliked my success, and now I saw that same bitterness mirrored in James. The next morning, I watched through my window as James and Rebecca left for the day. When Martha came with my breakfast, a woman who had stayed by my side for 30 years, I whispered that I needed to tell her something awful. She understood quickly as I explained, replying, "Mrs. Weber, I've suspected something was wrong for months, especially how they've been messing with your medications. Whatever you need, I'm here." An hour later, I was alone in my studio dialing a number I hadn't used in almost 10 years. Victor Morales. His voice was still deep and steady. "Victor," I said, my voice cracking. "It's Caroline." After a long pause, I finally asked for his help and mentioned the urban hub concept we'd once dreamed up together. I could feel him lean forward, intrigued. The idea still sparked something in both of us. For the first time since I found Elaine's body, I felt something awaken. More than anger, it was purpose. January 15th, the morning after that birthday, I sat in my studio, rethinking my life like I once evaluated a building structure. How did I let this happen? James had woven himself into every corner of my life after Elaine died. By late 2024, he'd convinced me to switch doctors, from Dr. Leonard, who had treated me for 20 years, to Dr. Harrison, a friend of his. I studied my shaking hands. Was it really my health? Or the mix of pills James gave me every morning and night? When Martha brought tea, she also handed me a notebook. "I've been tracking the changes in your meds," she whispered. "The labels don't match." She'd started keeping notes 8 months ago, when my symptoms got worse after every new prescription. I thanked her, deeply moved. She reminded me how I'd once helped fund her daughter's college without asking for anything in return. "They've been paying me to report your confusion," she admitted, "but I've only told them what they want to hear." Using a burner phone Martha gave me, I contacted Dr. Leonard. "James said you preferred working with his doctor," he noted. "Edward," I said, "I think I'm being poisoned." We set up a meeting at a private clinic. That afternoon, while James thought I was resting, Martha drove me there. Dr. Leonard did a full checkup. "Your heart's strong," he said. "What you're dealing with looks like anticholinergic toxicity, possibly benzo overdose." I already knew it. "I have to report this," he said. "Not yet," I told him. "If they find out too soon, they'll act faster or claim I'm delusional. I need protection first." He agreed to give me 3 weeks. "How will you fake taking the pills?" Martha asked. "He watches you," My husband was an actor, I said. He taught me a few tricks. I'll hide the pills under my tongue. That night, I played the fragile mother role. James brought my meds, watching me closely. I slipped the pills under my tongue, drank water, and let my hand shake a little. You seem better, he said. Just a moment of clarity, I replied. Once alone, I pulled the pills from my mouth and placed them under a desk lamp. The next day, I would start gathering proof that my own son was trying to kill me. May 15th arrived, bringing the dinner celebration at the Palmer Club. The air buzzed with excitement. The venue had been dressed in elegance, a sharp contrast to the tension running just under the surface. James and Rebecca had spared no expense. I sat at the head of the table, the honored guest, playing my part as the proud but fragile matriarch. I made sure my hands trembled just enough, my speech slightly hesitant. Across the room, I saw Elizabeth Chun speaking quietly with Victor and Michael. Everything was in place. Midway through dessert, James stood to make his announcement. I'm proud to share that I've been named partner at Westridge Development, he said, pausing for applause. None of this would have been possible without my incredible wife and of course my mother. He raised his glass. I smiled and stood slowly, the room quieting. I have an announcement of my own, I said, my voice measured. Tonight is about celebration, but also about truth. The Weber Foundation for Young Architects has been officially launched, and it now owns the home I built, my life's work, to support future talent. Confusion rippled through the crowd. I continued, every guest here tonight will receive a detailed press packet outlining the foundation's mission and the circumstances that made it necessary. At that, Elizabeth stepped forward. Mrs. Weber has cooperated fully with our investigation, she said clearly. As of tonight, we are opening a formal case into suspected elder abuse, financial fraud, and attempted poisoning. Gasps filled the room. James went pale, Rebecca's jaw tightened. Victor handed Michael the signal. Two plainclothes officers approached James and Rebecca discreetly. I sat down, heart steady. I had waited months for this. In the weeks that followed, charges were filed. Dr. Harrison's license was suspended. Investigators uncovered a pattern of similar cases. Rebecca's past came to light, and with the evidence from our surveillance and financial trails, there was little room for defense. James was arraigned and denied bail. I resumed work on the Urban Hub project, meeting regularly with Carrington's team. Though my energy had limits, my focus had returned. Martha remained my closest ally, her loyalty never wavering. Each day felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. By July, the first stage of the Urban Hub had broken ground. I visited the site in a wheelchair, watching young architects excitedly pore over blueprints I'd helped shape. The future was being built not just for them but for me too. On August 10th, I stood once more at the edge of my property, now legally held in trust by the Weber Foundation. The same home where betrayal had nearly ended me had become the center of my rebirth. As the sun dipped low over the skyline, I whispered to myself, this is not an ending. It's a new foundation. My revenge had to meet the same rigorous standards I once applied to my designs. On May 10, 2025, just 5 days before the confrontation, the transformation I required was both physical and tactical. For the upcoming dinner at the Palmer Club, I needed to look like the person I had become. It had to be as impactful a statement as any structure I'd ever created. Victor said I looked too severe when I tried on a black designer suit in his penthouse, where I'd been discreetly preparing. Although I had made progress in my recovery, I wasn't completely healed. Tremor still returned when I was fatigued, and now and then, I relied on Victor's help to fill in cognitive blanks. I'm not going to a funeral, I agreed with him, though in many ways it was exactly that. A farewell to the passive, controlled version of myself I had let them create. We chose a crimson dress, sharp, structured, and deliberate in its simplicity. It signaled power, not weakness. My hair, once styled softly to appease James, was now cut into a clean, sharp bob that framed my face with authority. They won't know who you are, Victor said with a hint of awe. That's the idea, I answered. I rehearsed walking in the modest heels I'd chosen, A feat after months of physical decline, but vital to the entrance I envisioned. Just 3 hours before the dinner, I met with Elizabeth Chun in her office to finalize everything. Officers will be in plain clothes at each exit, she told me. No arrests tonight, we're just collecting information. But their presence should help avoid drama. She handed me a leather portfolio. Inside were financial records, medical documents, surveillance transcripts, enough to begin proceedings, though she reminded me the full case would take time. Justice moves slowly when powerful people are involved, she added. I nodded. I'm not expecting speed, Ms. Chun. I know strong foundations matter more than fast finishes. Back at Victor's place, Martha helped me prepare, tucking the medical alert device under my dress, a precaution from Dr. Leonard due to the lingering heart effects of the drugs I'd been given. They'll never see it coming, she whispered, clasping the pearls my mother left me, the same ones Rebecca had already claimed as hers. Pulling up to the Palmer Club in Victor's car, I saw James and Rebecca greeting guests. James looked sharp in a new suit. Rebecca sparkled in jewelry, some of which I recognized from my own collection. Ready? Victor asked as he offered his arm. I felt a wave of dizziness, another lingering symptom of the poisoning, and steadied myself. I'd spent nearly 4 months designing this moment. We entered exactly when planned. After all guests were seated and James had begun looking around nervously, the maitre d' called out, Mr. Victor Morales and Mrs. Carolyn Weber. Heads turned. Faces shifted from confusion to stunned recognition. I walked slowly but confidently, holding myself as the accomplished architect I had once been. Mother. James looked as though he'd seen a ghost, and in some ways he had. I nodded at them coolly. Thank you for the lovely evening. Rebecca glanced between Victor and me, clearly recalculating. You look well. Amazing what proper medication can do, I replied, smiling with purpose. During dinner, I watched James wrestle with the contrast between the woman he left confused and weakened that morning and the composed, commanding figure now charming his peers. As dessert was served, James stood and tapped his glass. I have an announcement. It was May 15, 2025, the night everything would change. He shared his news about making partner at Westridge. I exchanged a look with Victor, a subtle nod passing between us. Congratulations, James, I said. I also have an announcement. Right then, Carrington executives and my legal team entered, exactly as choreographed. I'm thrilled to announce the launch of the Urban Hub, I said, voice strong. A $120 million renewal initiative for the industrial district. Staff distributed elegant portfolios to each guest. And, I continued, noting James's now colorless face, the creation of the Weber Foundation for Young Architects. As of last month, it owns my home, which will become a permanent education center. Rebecca's champagne froze midair. And finally, I said, signaling Elizabeth Chun, some legal matters require attention. She calmly presented James with documents outlining investigations into fraud, medical tampering, and conspiracy. His confident exterior collapsed. This is insane, he stammered. She's confused, ask her doctor. Dr. Harrison is being questioned, Elizabeth replied evenly. Cooperating could help him. Rebecca quickly distanced herself. James handled all the medical stuff, I barely knew. But Elizabeth's highlighted transcripts proved otherwise. Dinner guests quietly left. Only the Carrington team remained beside me, a clear show of support. James, now panicked, tried one final tactic. Mother, you're not well. Let's talk tomorrow. I met his eyes. I've never thought more clearly. It took 3 months to undo what your poisoning did to me, but I'm back. Poisoning? That's ridiculous, he said, but his eyes darted toward the exits where he saw the officers. We have lab results, Elizabeth added. And Martha gave a full statement about the pill switches she saw. At her name, James's face darkened. That meddling. Careful, I said flatly. Threatening a witness won't help. Rebecca, seeing the plan disintegrate, began easing away. I need the restroom, she murmured, grabbing her purse. My colleague will escort you, Elizabeth said, motioning to a female detective. The whole thing unfolded with calm precision. No handcuffs, no scenes, just the steady presence of consequences. As the room emptied, James stood alone. His partners gave him distant nods as they left. The invisible social balance was shifting right before him. You've ruined my career, he finally said. No, I corrected, you did that. When you decided my death was worth the promotion. This time he didn't deny it. You never understood, he said. What it felt like always in your shadow. Dad got it. Mentioning my late husband, who'd struggled with my success, was meant to hurt. Once it would have. Now, I just saw it as another manipulation. You think you've won, Rebecca spat, the warmth gone from her voice. Caroline Weber, triumphant again. She paused. But James was right about something. You'll end up alone in that cold penthouse, with nothing but your drawings for company instead of a real family. I let the words sit in the air for a beat, then responded calmly. I'd take an honest blueprint over a dishonest family any day. After the call ended, I set down my pencil. I wasn't shaking, anger had passed long ago. What remained was a kind of clarity. For years I'd built structures meant to last lifetimes, while the foundations of my own life had quietly cracked beneath me. Now I was finally laying new ones carefully, intentionally. October 22nd, 1 week after the plea deal offer. I sat in the courtroom not to testify but to watch. James entered looking smaller than I remembered. Rebecca avoided my eyes. Dr. Harrison, gaunt and grim, barely raised his head. All three pled guilty. The judge's gavel fell with a weight that felt more like closure than celebration. Outside the courthouse, Elizabeth stood beside me. You did what needed to be done, she said. I nodded. It wasn't justice in the Hollywood sense. No dramatic speeches, no applause, but it was real and it was done. Winter arrived quietly in Chicago that year. I returned to work, easing back into my role on the Urban Hub project. The foundation took shape, 2 young architects submitting designs, mentorship programs filling quickly. My name, once used by others to manipulate trust, now stood for something purposeful again. One evening in late December, Victor and I stood overlooking the frozen lake, wine glasses in hand. Do you regret it? He asked softly. I shook my head. No. Painful as it was, I needed to see them for who they truly were. I needed to stop being a ghost in my own story. He smiled. Then welcome back to the living. January 15, 2026. 1 year since the betrayal came to light. The Weber Foundation for Young Architects welcomes you, read the stone plaque, catching the winter sun as reporters gathered for the grand opening of what had once been my home, now repurposed into an educational center. The date was no accident. Exactly 1 year since I overheard Rebecca's damning birthday wish. Beside me stood Martha, no longer a housekeeper, but now the administrative director of the foundation. Behind us waited the first 20 scholarship students, ready for the ribbon cutting. A reporter from Architectural Digest called out, Mrs. Weber, how does it feel to see your home like this? I stepped to the microphone, steadying myself. Vertigo still visited now and then, a side effect of the medication poisoning, though not as often as before. I said, architecture has always been about change, taking ideas and turning them into spaces where people live their lives. This building has gone through many changes. First it was land, then a home, later a battlefield. I paused and looked directly at the reporters. And now, perhaps its most important change, from private residence to lasting public legacy. A Tribune reporter raised her hand. And your son? Any comments on his sentencing? Elizabeth Chun stepped forward, but I gently signaled her to stop. My son made his choices. The courts have handed down the consequences. Today isn't about what was destroyed, but what's being built. I gestured to the young students behind me. They're what matters now. The legal process had wrapped up more quickly than we expected. With so much evidence in the eventual plea deals, James received 8 years, Rebecca 3, and Dr. Harrison 6, with his license permanently revoked. Even more impactful, Elizabeth's team used his cooperation to launch investigations into 3 other suspicious deaths involving wealthy elderly patients. After the event, Victor walked with me through what used to be my house. The changes were impressive. My old studio, once destined to become a closet, was now a high-tech design space. The dining room, where James had once dosed my medication, had become a lecture hall. "Does this feel strange?" Victor asked as we stopped in what used to be my bedroom, now a reference library. "Less than I thought," I replied. "It feels right." Later that night, Carrington's team hosted a reception to celebrate the groundbreaking of Urban Hub's first building. At 76, I found myself back in the spotlight, not as a novelty but as a respected professional. "The design of the community center is brilliant," the city's sustainability director commented, "especially the way the wellness center is integrated with employment resources." I smiled. Architecture isn't just about buildings. It's about building systems that help people thrive. As I mingled, accepting kind words and discussing design details, I caught my reflection in a mirror. The woman I saw looked nothing like the weakened version of myself from the year before. My back was straight, my eyes steady. Even if my hand still trembled at times, a reminder of what I'd lived through. Howard Carrington raised his glass. A toast to Caroline Weber, whose vision for Urban Hub is reshaping not just our city's skyline, but its soul. The applause filled the room. What I felt in that moment was something I hadn't recognized right away: pride. Not the pride I once had in James' success, as I tried to pass along a legacy through him. This was quieter, cleaner. Pride in work done well and with purpose. Afterward, Elizabeth pulled me aside with updates on the other cases tied to Dr. Harrison. "We're making progress," she said. 2 families have some closure now, finally understanding what happened to their loved ones. And the third, still under investigation but hopeful. She smiled. "Your case gave us a roadmap. You've helped more people than you realize." May 15, 2026. Exactly 1 year after the Palmer Club confrontation, I waited in the visitor area of the federal prison. The room was made to feel somewhat normal. Beige walls, hard chairs, humming vending machines. But there was no hiding its true purpose: controlled contact between the free and the confined. "Are you sure about this?" Victor had asked earlier that day. He'd offered to join me, but this was something I needed to face alone. James walked in wearing a loose khaki uniform. Prison had aged him. His hair had gone grayer, and his posture had lost its confidence. The arrogance I'd known for years had faded into something more guarded. "Mother," he said, sitting down. "This is unexpected," I replied. "I told your lawyer I was coming." He nodded slowly. "Yes, but I didn't think you'd actually." He gestured vaguely. "Why are you here?" A fair question. While he had been locked away, I had rebuilt my life. The Weber Foundation was thriving. Urban Hub had already begun work on its 2nd building. My new home, built of steel and glass to suit my physical needs, was nearly complete. "I came to see you," I said, "before I move forward fully." His eyes narrowed. "Move forward?" I told him I was leaving next week for a 3-month architectural tour. Singapore, Tokyo, Barcelona, studying urban development projects for the next phase of Urban Hub. "At my age, travel like this takes effort," I added, "especially with the health issues your actions caused." "So you came to say goodbye," he said, his tone sharp. "Updating your will before the trip?" I couldn't help smiling. "James, there's nothing left for you in the will. The house is now the foundations. My career assets are in a trust for architecture education. Whatever you didn't transfer to offshore accounts is now going to scholarships and research." His confusion was real. "Then why are you here?" I studied him. This man I had once believed would carry on my legacy. What I felt now was unexpected pity. I came to understand not just what you did, but why. What makes a person decide their parent's life is worth less than their impatience? He looked away. "You wouldn't get it." "Try me," I said. "I've spent this past year understanding what went wrong." "It started small," he finally said. "After Dad died, you were unstoppable. running the firm, winning awards. You didn't need anyone. Then when Aunt Elaine died, you finally looked vulnerable. So you took advantage, I said. He flinched. At first I really wanted to help. But then I realized you trusted me with tech, with money. It felt like I finally had control in our relationship. And Rebecca, she saw a chance. She's always been practical. The new medication, I said. You introduced it right before the confrontation. That was supposed to be the end, wasn't it? He didn't deny it. Harrison said your heart wouldn't last 3 months on that dose. I nodded, accepting what I already suspected. You would have watched me die. I would have been the loving son, he corrected. That was the story that mattered. I sighed. Yes, I suppose it was. January 15, 2027. 2 years to the day since I heard Rebecca's damning wish. I hosted a small event at my new lakeside house. A sleek, modernist space of steel, glass, and wood designed for both strength and accessibility. To Caroline Weber and Urban Hub's next chapter, Howard Carrington said as he raised his glass. The last 2 years had changed not just my situation, but how I understood what was truly important. My recovery had plateaued 6 months ago. The tremors in my right hand, occasional memory lapses, and reduced energy were here to stay. But instead of defining me, they had become just part of my life. Elizabeth Chun, now a federal judge, flipped through the Urban Hub report. The numbers are incredible, she said. After leading the prosecution in what the press dubbed the Weber case, she'd become an ongoing ally. Victor arrived late, joining me on the terrace. Since my recovery, our bond had become something neither of us predicted. Equal partners in separate homes, but deeply connected lives. Sorry I'm late, he said, taking the glass Martha handed him. The investors from Singapore had questions about the sustainability data. While the conversations carried on around me, I paused to take it all in. This group wasn't bound by blood, but held together by shared purpose and chosen connection. Martha and her daughter, now running the foundation's educational wing, Michael Donovan, who'd gone from detective to head of security at the foundation, and the first group of Weber Scholarship graduates. Elizabeth and her family were also there. A speech, Howard Carrington called out with a raised glass. I smiled but shook my head. I'm an architect, Howard. We build, not talk. Nonsense, Victor said. I've seen enough of your presentations to know you can do both. With a little encouragement, I stepped to the edge of the terrace. The lake calm in front of us, Chicago's skyline clear in the distance. 2 years ago today, I began. I stood at a crossroads. Either accept an ending someone else had written for me or design a new beginning. As an architect, the answer came naturally. I gestured toward the nearby Urban Hub model. We built. Soft murmurs of agreement rose from the crowd. But over these 2 years, I've come to understand that our most powerful designs aren't buildings. They're relationships. Trust. Shared purpose. The frameworks that give our lives meaning. Once the guests had gone, Victor stayed to help Martha clear the final glasses, despite her protests. We sat for a while, watching the moon's reflection ripple on the lake. You seem deep in thought, he noted. I got a letter from James yesterday, I said. The first one in a year and a half. Victor's expression darkened. What did he say? He's up for parole next year. He's finished several rehab programs, found religion, written a memoir about toxic families. Wants me to know all of that. Are you going to write back? He asked. I shook my head. There's nothing left to say. Some buildings are damaged beyond repair. All you can do is study them for what went wrong and leave them in the past. Victor nodded quietly. Any regrets? He asked after a moment. I took the question seriously. The effects of the poisoning lingered. The hand tremors, occasional memory slips, my energy not quite what it used to be. But those limitations had led me to rethink how I designed my home and how I worked. Just one, I admitted. That I didn't call you sooner. I lost years to fear before James ever gave me those pills. Victor reached for my hand, his fingers lacing through mine. We have now, he said. And we're using it well. Inside, architectural drawings for the third urban hub phase were ready for tomorrow's meeting. A stack of scholarship applications waited on my desk. The tremor in my hand was still there, a constant reminder of what nearly slipped away. But like any architect, I had accounted for that weakness in the design instead of ignoring it. To second chances, I said, lifting my glass. And to the architects who make them possible, Victor answered. Beyond us, the skyline stood. A mix of old buildings I designed long ago and the new ones rising now. And in that view, I held fast to the truth that had saved me. It's never too late to rebuild your life. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you feel ready, share your own story in the comments. Your voice matters.